Babe, wake up, another boomer shooter just dropped and it's called HROT, or HROT, or HROT. To be honest, I'm not really sure how to pronounce the title, but no matter what you call it, this retro-inspired FPS features some impressive gunplay, an intense and occasionally terrifying atmosphere, and an odd playfulness that made me genuinely laugh. My name's Johnny Bueno, and this odd little game, which I'm just going to pronounce as HROT moving forward, had me hooked from start to finish. It shares many similarities with 2018's Dusk, another fantastic boomer shooter, in that it wears its inspirations on its sleeve. Low poly graphics, tight gunplay, fast-paced levels, and secrets galore are all present in HROT, much like what you would find in classics like Quake. This time, HROT gives the genre a Slavic coat of paint. Set in Czechoslovakia in the 1980s, following some sort of disaster, HROT features an incredibly bleak atmosphere where everything just feels dead and barren. There are even areas where enemies aren't present that just give straight-up liminal space vibes. This atmosphere is only amplified by the color palette used for designing the environment and enemies, which pretty much consists of various shades of brown. There's a few outliers here and there, but other than that, almost everywhere you go, you'll just be continuously running into brown. I get it though, since the game takes place in a post-disaster country, it's like all the color and life has been sucked out of the world, and you're left with this depressing, gritty brown that you need to trudge through. It might get somewhat stale after a while, but the game isn't that long anyway, and it really does fit the game's tone quite well. HROT will take you through 3 distinct episodes, each featuring different levels with varying locations. Much like the classics, starting a game as easy as selecting an episode and a difficulty level, and you're immediately flung into the action. No flashy menus or long intro sequences that dump a ton of lore on you that you'll forget within the first 3 minutes of playing. It's just you and your pistol. That simplicity is easily a strong point for HROT, as when it comes to retro FPS titles, the enemy-slaying, gun-swapping action really is the center point of the game. But there are some non-action aspects to HROT that I actually found weirdly pleasing and enjoyable to mess around with. Found in some levels, there are neat little interactables that serve as a fun break between blasting enemies. There's a fully functioning piano early on that you can play some tunes on, as well as a pool table if you want to take some time to pretend you're playing billiards at your local bar. There's also a vintage handheld game just chilling on the floor in one level that you can pick up and attempt to rack up a high score. The absolute best one, though, is the train set located in episode 3, which has not 1, not 2, but 3 total speed settings. I spent an embarrassing amount of time messing around with the train set, mostly to see if it held any secrets, and I'm honestly not ashamed of it. I just love that the developer took the time to put things like this in the game, as it gives the players a little pleasant, lighthearted break from the generally crushing atmosphere. They could have just had the piano make 1 or 2 sounds or the billiard balls not individually interactable, but the fact that they did, I think, shows an extra level of care and compassion when it came to developing the game. Moving on, enemy variety consists of a pretty standard mix of weaker pistol-wielding bad guys, chunky grenade-chucking bad guys, flying bad guys, and so on. You're going to see a lot of gas masks as well, which makes sense considering the toxic nature of the environment. Hell, even the horses are wearing gas masks, which I have an immense amount of respect for. Maybe the enemies aren't so bad if they're even willing to protect their animals. Too bad they can't be protected from me. The actual number of different enemies you'll encounter between the 3 episodes is pretty decent, although during my playthrough it felt like I was seeing the more humanoid enemies far more often than some of the animal or paranormal type enemies. But this is totally fine, as this is a first-person shooter after all, so it makes sense you'd encounter more of the enemies that can face you on equal footing with firearms. Of course, that equal footing is disrupted when they decide to bring in an attack helicopter to gun you down in only a few hits. Yes, the game can feel a little unfair at times, even on normal difficulty, and there are some enemies that can be a little frustrating to deal with. The helicopter often doesn't show up alone and can bring a horde of ground enemies along with it, forcing you to split your attention between land and air. There's also these wheelchair-bound enemies who can absolutely obliterate you before you can even blink if you're not paying attention. They shoot a steady stream of bullets in front of them which hit extremely hard, and they can show up in tight corridors where there's nowhere to run. They're not too bad to dodge as long as you're always on the move, but they've taken me by surprise more than once. This led to a swift death and even further anger from my end as I forgot to save since the start of the level. Oh yeah, and there's no autosaving in this game, so don't be like me and save as often as you possibly can. Now, the boss fights are where things get a little strange. Many of them are just kind of silly. Like one of the first bosses you fight, assuming you're doing the episodes in order, is a gorilla with cannon hands. He is admittedly creepy looking, but overall it's just kind of a goofy design for a boss, and this is one of the main aspects of the game where HROT takes itself a little less seriously. Another boss is a literal piece of gym equipment in the form of a pommel horse that shoots rockets. That's right, in HROT, even normally inanimate objects can come alive and try to murder you. There are some normal boss enemies though, like a tank or a Dark Souls boss, but it did seem like the more goofy bosses outweigh the serious ones, like these soldiers riding bumper cars. None of them were overly difficult, as many went down with several hits from the grenade launcher, but they will punish you pretty quickly if you slip up with your movement or get stuck in an unfortunate spot. I will say the final bosses for each episode had me laughing out loud at how ridiculous they were. I won't spoil them here, but the final boss of the third episode in particular took me by complete surprise and might actually be one of the wildest bosses I've fought in recent memory. While some of the more outlandish enemies might make you laugh, there are some actual horror elements to HROT that will bring you back down to earth and remind you that you are playing a game with an incredibly grim atmosphere. It's seriously been a while since I've been jump scared so many times in a single game. Yes, jump scares are kind of cheap, but I can't be mad when many of them are well executed and get you when you least expect it. I do think that the developer does a pretty fantastic job of blending these moments in with some of the more lighthearted, silly ones. The first 2 episodes didn't really lean too heavily one way or the other. At no point did they come off so serious that they were trying too hard, nor did they act so goofy that they couldn't be taken seriously. The third episode is maybe the only exception, as I felt like I had far more outlandish, wacky moments compared to the first 2. I mean, this should be obvious from the very first level, where you're a one-man army fighting an entire force of newts. HROT does feature some pretty tight gunplay when it comes to taking down enemies. You'll have your typical arsenal found in most classic shooting games, like a pistol, a shotgun, a super shotgun, and a submachine gun. Each has their uses, like the shotguns being more effective against larger enemies, or the submachine gun excelling against hordes of weaker enemies, and switching between weapons is quick and satisfying. When playing, I stuck to the golden rule of always being on the move and always swapping weapons to meet the situation, and overall, I didn't have too difficult of a time coming out on top of most enemy encounters. There are some other handy weapons maybe not as common in other games, like a lightning gun that chains lightning between all enemies near your target. There's also a crossbow that shoots high damage arrows with great accuracy. I actually found these weapons the most fun to use due to their uniqueness, though they notably had far less ammo pickups compared to other weapons. More often than not, these pickups are found in a secret area. Nearly all levels are host to several secret areas that can be hidden behind obvious cracks in the infrastructure that need to be blown up, or behind an interactable portion of a wall that can be opened. These usually house health pickups, guns, ammo, and other goodies, and try as I might, I often finished a level with less than half of the secrets discovered. It got to a point where I was spamming the interact key on every single wall I came across in hopes of discovering a hidden area. This did actually work in a few cases though, so it wasn't entirely a pointless tactic. In retrospect, after completing the game, I have no idea how the hell anyone would be able to find some of these secrets without a guide, but I certainly don't recommend using one for your first playthrough. The satisfaction of finding a hidden area on your own without any assistance can't be understated. Anyway, after tackling countless enemies, fighting strange bosses, and discovering as many secrets as I could, I was ready to claim my prize upon completion of my first episode. The prize? A recipe. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, it must be a recipe containing a secret code that, when combined with recipes from the other 2 episodes, gives you access to a hidden level. But that's not the case. It's a literal recipe for beef stroganoff. The lighthearted, less serious nature of HROT strikes again, and I couldn't be more happy because I absolutely love beef stroganoff. Want to know what the other 2 recipes are? Better play the game for yourself and find out. And I think that's a great spot to wrap up this review. Overall, HROT offered an incredibly addicting, albeit short, experience that somehow made me laugh uncontrollably one moment and soil myself the other. A game that can effectively make you feel several different emotions during your time spent with it is a success in my book, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. HROT somehow managed to meet and exceed the high bar set by Dusk for boomer shooters, and I couldn't be more excited to see what's next for both the developer and the genre. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and let me know what you think in the comments below. I appreciate every bit of interaction and support, as I love making videos just like this one. So please subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, thank you for watching.